Welcome to Leading People with me, Jerry Murray. This episode of Leading People is brought to you by Wide Circle, helping you make better talent decisions. To learn more, visit widecircle.eu. That's widecircle.eu. Leading People is a podcast which features insightful conversations with leading people about leading people. Yes, that's a play on words. In each episode, you get tips from leading people such as CEOs, HR professionals, authors, and thought leaders on all aspects of leading people, including how to attract, engage, develop, and grow talent to build successful organizations. And we provide insights on how to lead yourself so you can consistently perform at your best. In this episode, I chat with author and communications expert Sheila Parry about her new book, Take Pride: How to Build Organizational Success Through People. While the concept of being proud of our work is something that many people can identify with, pride is actually a mnemonic for a framework that Sheila developed over many years of working with organizations, running her own successful internal communications agency, the Blue Ballroom, and carrying out independent research. A core sentiment running through our conversation is the question, do they know who you are? Sheila Parry, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jerry. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show, and we know each other for a long time, and you wrote a book a couple of years ago, which was one of the reasons why I invited you on here. But I do know that you've got huge experience in the world of business. And that. Maybe for our listeners, you could start with a little bit about how did you get here? Was there a special person, place, or thing or event that stands out on your journey to where you are today? Or was that sort of epiphany moment that said, wow?
Well, I think when I think about my last 25, 30 years of working, I think to a large extent I've been very, very fortunate. I've been one of those people who's landed in an area of work that I really enjoyed and I really flourished in. And I have really had the epiphany moments with people that I've met, people that I've worked for that have given me some guidance or some insight, I would say, inspiration even, to make me think about what I'm doing and move my career on. I've spent the last 25, 30 years largely in communications in some form or another, starting with advertising and marketing communications and moving fairly swiftly into internal employee communications. And that's where I found my niche and a very sort of happy place quite early on in my career.
Fantastic. And for those who are not familiar with the world of internal communications, my own experience is it's actually probably one of the most challenging aspects of communication profession to get to do it well.
Yes, indeed. I think it sort of crosses over the two sort of hugely important areas of people and business, people and the organisational impact, and so it needs the skills of HR people, of branding people, of communications people, but certainly when I started working, it hadn't really created its own profession, and I think that I was lucky enough to join or find this specialism at a time when the profession was quite embryonic, and my own career developed alongside the development of the concept of internal communications, and it became more and more it became more and more of a strategic driver for employee engagement, employee performance, and I think it's fair to say that I was part of that spearheading that change as well, to bring the idea of creativity and business together to actually make business impact. And that was one of the turning points, I think, in my career, when I stopped thinking about only writing the story and creating beautiful channels to carry messages, but actually thinking about the impact they would have on on business and on people. And I moved towards the idea that if I could help companies communicate better amongst themselves, and increase the communication skill set instead of the channels, that's where the impact really lay. And so I moved my attention more towards, I don't like the word enabling, but helping other people communicate, as opposed to doing the communications myself.
Yeah. And of course, you set up your own communications business, so you also got the practice of it from the inside out in terms of running a team. And
that's so true. I really feel like my experience was hard earned, with some wonderful highlights and very, very challenging times as well. And I'm thrilled that I was able to combine my experience with employing people with advising other people on how to be a good employer. There's one of the business book reviewers recently said, there aren't enough business books written by people who actually have run businesses, and I really feel that my insights, if you like, are very practical and very, very tested, from a small company of 25 people, can be applied to teams of 25 within companies of 200,000 people. So I believe that knowing why employees come to work, why people are motivated, what makes a good experience versus a poor experience, was very, very practically earned.
And of course, even in large organizations of thousands of people, even at the more senior levels, their usual span of control is only maybe 5-10 people of direct reports. And then they rely on this more cascading effect, and they have to set the tone for that in a way.
Indeed. That was, if you asked me about a sort of pivotal moment, I was working around 2012, 2013. I started working with a particular CEO who had been, he was in charge of a company of 350, but it was part of a huge global brand. And the work that we did together was really exciting, and a really good combination of business and communication skills coming together. And I just thought, if you could actually recreate some of his qualities in 300 people, then you'd have, a company of, 10,000 who could be equally well impacted. And that's when I thought that, cascade is what we look at, you think about the concept of cascade, but actually it's like 300 hubs of dynamism, 300 hubs of motivation, of positive energy, of whatever good leadership. And that's when you can start thinking, if I can reach 300 people in the same organization, then you've got a chance of motivating and instigating change at big numbers.
Yeah, particularly if there are 300 managers who then have another influence over 300 people each, then you have a chance to create leverage. And of course,
Exactly.
The concept of cloning comes in here. And at the same time, maybe if you look into the management leadership literature, maybe it's more about role modeling, because you can become a great footballer, but not everybody scores the goal. Sometimes you're in goal, or sometimes you're defending. It's that ability to play the game and deliver results and inspire other people that maybe comes out. That's a great context for the book, and because you wrote it from a deep well. I read it and I thought, wow. So I take it you really dug deep, not just inside your experiences, but inside yourself to create this book. And would you like to tell the listeners what the book is about and the title to get us into this? And then you can flesh it out for me. You've got a great model in there.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, very exciting. The book's called Take Pride: How to Build Organizational Performance Through People. And I think that the USP, if you like, about this book is that it really brings out the role of the individual in a company. So that is the role of the individual if you're the CEO, or a role of an individual if you're an employee. And I so fervently believe in the potential of the impact of one person on a team, in a role, with a customer, on the culture, minute by minute, day by day, that this book is written for everybody to make work better. Now, clearly, to get your kind of influence going and the model being taken up, I did combine the organizational perspective with the individual perspective. So it was written for leaders and for influencers to take up and apply when they're in their organizations. But it really sort of insists in a rather sort of emphatic and dogged way every step of the way to think in your employees' shoes. We're taught in business schools and marketing schools to look at your customer relation, your customer experience through the shoes of the customer. But I kind of turned that around to say, look at your employee experience through the eyes of the individual, and try to understand their individual motivations. And that's a core. That's the kernel of the book, if you like. Because pride is such a personal thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's not okay. So it's a clever title because lots of people out there are thinking, well, it's all about pride. However, that's also sort of acronym, mnemonic, whatever you call it, for a model that you've created. Before we jump into the breakdown of the model, you talked about the employee experience. You talked about the leaders, the individual level. What are some of the things you've seen leaders struggle with big time, in terms of creating this employee experience? What sorts of things you see as a sort of pattern amongst leaders who really struggle with this versus ones who don't? And then as you answer that, maybe you start to unpack the model for us.
Sure. Well, I think, yes, if you take a step back, perhaps, the concept of pride is something that is benchmarked in employee opinion surveys the world over. I think I first heard the idea back in the 90s when I had to analyse, results of an employee opinion survey, and there was a score that showed that something like 80% plus of employees in this organisation were proud to work there, which is pretty good. I mean, by any standards, and yet, when you dived into the detail of the same survey, you would find that there were aspects of working at this organisation that were highly frustrating, were not particularly, just demonstrative of good management practices. People were maybe afraid to speak their mind, or they didn't have the right equipment to do their work, or they didn't share the same values with people. And I'm not saying all of those negatives are in the same organisation, but the concept of pride is quite a sort of emotive dimension, and yet other things can be going quite wrong. And that, to answer your question, is I think what CEOs sometimes find always a challenge for CEOs is that they're quite distant from a lot of the day-to-day of their organizations. And so they may hear about the big topics, the big sentiments in their organization, but they don't know the employee experience as it's lived. And if this cascade that you mentioned earlier on is too long, or is ineffective, or it's frankly cascade is it's not the only organizational structure of these days. But if the networks aren't working, then they can be quite distant. And so I've worked for CEOs, for example, who want to create a huge impact with an announcement of a new strategy, and they and their inner teams have been working on it for months. And they have a 45-minute slot at a conference, or they have a video of 15 minutes to make, and they are trying to deliver a lot of complex process and thought and direction into a very short time. And many CEOs come to that party thinking, what do I want to say? And they do not think about the people receiving that communication. Some of them don't even think, I mean, I take CEOs through this exercise, and sort of, you're going on stage. sometimes virtually, sometimes physically. But what do you really know about the people sitting there waiting to hear you? Do they know who you are? Do they know you well? Do they know what you said last year? Are you new? All of these very human, important things. And I was 10 years ago when I started to sort of think about these topics, I was really shocked with how few senior people really, really think about the number of the depth of the number of people in front of them. And now you can reflect that across daily interactions. It's not all about performance. It's not all about audience, but the daily interactions of leadership with their teams, can normally do with a hell of a lot of improvement.
In the next part of our conversation, Sheila explains how her Pride model works and provides insights and examples on how this can be applied to both people in leadership positions and those being led. We even touch on the topic of waterproof phones. So let's unpack this wonderful model now. And I suppose, do you want to do it in order of PRIDE, or how do you want to do it? Let's take, and maybe you can, when you go into each part, if you've got insights or tips or learnings or examples, please share.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I won't run away from the fact that that pride is a mnemonic, and there are 5 factors. But I would like actually to start with the middle few letters, because this is how it became. This is how it came about. I started looking at what made people proud, what elements of life and working life makes people proud. And so taking it along that sort of journey, I started with the topic of reputation, because an organization's brand or reputation or brand or organization or purpose or anything about a company from the outside is wrapped up in its reputation. And that's the starting point of most people's experience with their employers. You're on the outside of the organization looking in, and so you're party to what a company chooses to put out about itself and what is said about it. So all the aspects of reputation. And the crux of the matter, I think, with employee engagement and employee motivation is if you go to a company because of its reputation and then the integrity of that reputation is somehow damaged or somehow incongruous with what you have expected. And so the reputation integrity relationship is absolutely at the fundamental heart of a good relationship with your work. So I started thinking, reputation, integrity. This is interesting. Now, what else is present in the companies that I've worked for, or in the organisations I've actually worked inside of? What is driving pride? So on top of the reputation and the experience when you get there, there is a sense of the future. There's a future.
Yeah.
Direction. And so the direction that a company is traveling in is hugely important to people's motivation as to whether they're going to hang around, whether there's something in it for them, whether it flies with their own personal career path or life path. Yeah. So quite honestly, reputation, integrity and direction emerge as hugely important factors in the employee relationship with work.
So these are the 3 RID of pride. Yeah?
Yes. And I mean, I first thought about my book was going to be, it's going to be the RI index. It just didn't sort of seem enough. But I did a lot of research. You couldn't
really call it RID because it wouldn't have been a great title for a book, eh?
It would not indeed. And actually, the thing about that, this work is that, in my experience and in my humble opinion, if you get RID right, you have a good company. But we are looking for companies to excel and to innovate and to be exciting. And when I looked at the very high performing companies and the companies with the highest incidences of pride and why, it was because they had purpose. And purpose, it's become a very popular topic at the moment. But it's, purpose, in my view, we have always seeked purpose. Man as man, woman as woman, individual as individual, we seek purpose. And some businesses have always had a true sense of purpose. You can think of charities, the public sector, education, health. There are some fabulous companies with fabulous life-changing purposes. There are also companies who have adopted purposes for different reasons. And when I started looking at this topic, it was fairly soon after the financial crisis of 2008-9. And where a lot of financial institutions had very much lost their way in terms of any contribution they were making to society, and they had to reappraise their roles and their purposes, and so purpose began to be a bit of a buzzword. It also is a lot of work is done around purpose because there's a sort of belief that it's a 21st century phenomenon, and millennials are looking for more of a sense of purpose than others before them. And I don't subscribe to that. But I do think they were very vocal about it. They have been, the next generation of the workforce are much more vocal about wanting to find meaning at work and wanting to actually follow something that is greater than a single job in a single company. So that there's a lot to say around purpose, but and I know it's one of your areas of interest as well, Jerry.
Yeah, purpose, and purpose really is another example of connecting to something beyond the organization, which again plays to this idea of stepping into other people's shoes.
Yes, and I think connection, being connected to each other. So I spend a lot of time, in the book and with clients, having them identify and articulate the purpose beyond the profit, or the purpose beyond the mission of the company. And yet applying this dimension of the individual is really important. And it's one of the areas that has actually gained most ground, I think, with the companies that I've worked with, is that if you look at why people are going to work as well, their own personal sense of purpose, it's rather different from organisational purpose. It's marvellous when they align. People talk about aligning, but I don't think I don't sort of wake up in the morning and think of myself aligning to an organisational purpose. I think of getting up in the morning and working because I want to do something well. I want to use my skills. In early stages of career, you want to be independent. You want to earn enough to leave home, to get out, and then you want to, maybe by the time you're at the end of your career, perhaps you want to make a contribution to the next generation. So your personal purpose really evolves over time.
Yeah.
And I think when you find a job or a career where you can fulfill your sense of purpose and at the same time do some good in a broader sense in society, that's when you start getting the stars colliding.
Yeah, you often find when you ask people about this personal purpose, some people will say it's about making a difference. And that can just be in their department or just in the day-to-day work they do. They don't need to be connected to the big purpose of whatever their organization is doing, trying to change the world or whatever statements they're making. Often it comes down to understanding why I go to work. And many people will often say, I want my work to make a difference. And then you'll find that when it makes a difference, they take pride in their work. So sort of
absolutely, and purpose gives you the motivation to make the effort. The effort gives you the ability to achieve more, and the achievement then brings you the pride in your work. And so it is a cycle. It really is a cycle. But purpose is funny. I mean, you asked for a little thought about, well, give me some examples. I'm very loath to pinpoint company purposes because they're very, very particular. But I remember years and years ago, I did do some work for Siemens, and at the time, their purpose was to solve the world's most difficult problems. And this was a sense of purpose that had application at the organizational level. I mean, they were kind of doing wonderful things with energy. They're massively into engineering. They're building the most complicated infrastructures for cities, you name it. If you walk onto a Southwest Trains, you walk across into a carriage that was built by them, and they are dealing with life's infrastructure challenges. Now that purpose is highly relatable to a lot of the vast majority of people who join Siemens, because they are taking on engineers, innovators, mathematicians. They're a huge operations company. They have to deal with really complicated supply chains, etc., etc. So that's an example I could give you of one where you think, yes, I want to be the best engineer I can be, and I've got a good chance of doing that at Siemens.
And that's one example. And when you looked at the other factors, like we'll get to E in a second, because I'm also very interested in E, and it's not just effort or engineering, it's something else. Did you see apart from that purpose, did you see all the other factors in your Pride model aligning, for the most part, what you could see around? Could the individuals identify with that and also have a sense of the reputation of the organization, the integrity, the direction?
Yes, I think the thing about these factors is that they have emerged from experience, but they've also emerged from research. I mean, people are looking for a decent experience at work. So the eye of integrity is really the absolute inner truth of your organization. And just as you might say, well, as an employer, I can look at the kind of life cycle. I can look at the sort of the processy sort of side of an employee's journey. As an individual, I actually look at my shift pattern or my day or my week. And this is an exercise that I've included in the book. There's a sort of inevitable how-tos, which are really difficult to do. But when I do workshops, this is one of the people's favourite exercises, because instead of looking at recruitment through to reward and recognition and learner development and alumni, we sit round and we talk about, well, actually, what's your week look like, or your shift pattern look like? And it used to start on a Monday morning when you got to work, but of course nowadays, not even with COVID, before COVID, it starts when you step out the shower and you look at your phone and you see how many emails are in there from the weekend, or how, because we're constantly connected, people's feeling of their inner truth of their job go way back. The blurring of work life has happened. Many people say, well, actually, I look at my phone before I get in the shower. It's like, it's pervasive. There's a so I
and with waterproof phones. My young daughter has told me her phone can resist water. You can do it in the shower now, yes?
Yeah, God forbid. I mean, this is bad enough, picking your iPhone up when you wake up. But you get what I'm saying, that your experience of your working life is made up of 100 small experiences. Yeah. It's how your boss talks to you. It's how your colleagues talk to you. It's whether you had a good journey to work, whether you're ever going to be able to see your colleagues again, what the location looks like. It's all of those things. Yeah. And so that's a very long, arduous process to actually start thinking in the shoes of your employees. Yeah.
And that's
the way to understand.
That's a great example. So anybody out there is wondering, when are the tips coming? You've just had a fantastic, particularly if you're a leader, and if you're a worker, are your leaders showing you and your managers that they actually appreciate and understand all those 100 little things that make up your experience at work?
Yeah. I mean, people talk about, values and behaviours, and they think about them as things you've got, you've got on a PowerPoint slide,
Yeah.
and they're not. They are the principles that drive every interaction you make with your employees and with each other. So yeah, integrity is not meaning the truth or the integrity of your ethics. It's the integrity of your brand promise.
Yeah.
And real life when we come and work for you.
In the final part of our conversation, we explore the last letter in Sheila's model, the letter E. And we end on advice on how to apply the model in your workplace. Okay, and let's just segue into a final point. One of the things, just let me make an observation. There's been billions spent, particularly in the last 20, 25 years, on employee engagement, not just in surveys, but in programs and that. And I've always wondered, I never hear people ask the question, how do we disengage our people? And it strikes me that reputation, you buy into this organization and you come in and you see something that wasn't quite what you expected, you don't feel treated well. And it doesn't take very much time for you to become disengaged. And that leads into this E, because it doesn't stand for engagement either, in case the listeners are wondering. But when we look at engagement, one of the factors that comes into play big time is your E in your pride model. Isn't that right?
That's right. And the E is energy. Now, I must admit, but by the time I got to PRID, I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is just too good to be true. I better find an E. And I thought about, should it be engagement? And actually, engagement is a sort of output of all the others. Whereas energy, when I was researching this book, actually, energy was a genuinely hot topic around the employment arena, because there was a lot of sort of, I suppose it was insight, a new insight at the time about the increasingly aging population we have anyway in Western Europe, and the impact that would have on work. And people were doing a lot of work about multi-generational working. But what came out to me was the need for us as individuals to furnish ourselves for a long working life. So it's a very practical dimension of energy that I'm looking at, because I think from an organisational point of view, if you've got a highly performing company, there are a lot of sort of techniques and strategies that you adopt to enable you to continue. So to be innovators, to be constantly looking for improvement with what you're offering customers. Longevity in organisations is one aspect of energy, but I came to it from this concept of how work impacts our lives, our health, and how our health impacts our work. And there had been research by Public Health England at the time, and it kind of kick-started the well-being movement in industry, actually, which had identified work as one of the major factors on health. So it had come from the research space and from the public sector, and I thought, wow, it's so true, isn't it, that our people are very depressed and lose purpose when they don't work. I mean, the long-term unemployed suffer in this regard, and yet when we go to work, only 1 in 3 of us are actually enjoying it. What is happening here? What are we doing wrong? And I think addressing the energy aspect is a very smart way of looking at making improvements in engagement.
Yeah, and if you go back, I mean, you don't have to go back that far to. Given personally, I went in and have done a lot of trainings and workshops and facilitation, and you'd even be warned not to mention things like energy or emotion or anything. We don't talk about those things around here. I sometimes used to joke, why do you not have any human beings working here? You know,
Exactly.
So I would ignore it. By the way, if anybody's listening, I would just throw the rule book out and do it anyway. Because guess what? That's when people started to really go, yeah, this is what it's all about. Because, you know, energy is so important to just how we function as human beings. And, you know, what exercise contributes to it, food contributes to it. There's a whole range of things that contribute to it. And the workload we have, our ability to prioritize, there's so many factors that contribute to whether we feel energetic or not. And if we don't feel energetic or energized, our motivation levels, no surprise that our motivation levels are going to be low. And so even teaching people how to organize their work in ways that don't deplete their energy, you know, large blocks of concentrated work will deplete your energy. So giving people the opportunity to take breaks, to do less intensive things, and teaching them how to do all that is going to make a huge difference to their ability to perform in a job, and just to have that energy they need to be able to get through their days.
Absolutely. And I think that you've touched on, you know, physical energy, there's also the emotional energy, and there's a great deal of research about, you asked about disengagement, and one of the largest creators of stress at work is when people feel they're out of control. This sort of feeling of they have no control, no agency. I think it's you know, probably referred to, but you have no agency over your role. You have no control over your role, and you know, I think that there are lots of companies who say, oh, well, we're very democratic, we're very, you know, egalitarian, the way we organise our work. But there are thousands and thousands of people who are, you know, zero hour contract in the gig economy, people who are picked up and dropped because of some other financial reason, usually, or logistical reason. But those are people in large numbers who have no control over the frame of their work. Now, you know, in certain organisations, and that's a huge factor in loss of engagement. But it's also a big impact on mental health and causing stress. But when I was doing the energy work, though, I mean, it's a very funny fact. But if you Google "work is bad for you," you will come up with gazillions of reasons. Sitting down too long is bad for you. Driving to work is bad for you. Standing up is bad for you. You know, traveling is bad for you. Shift work's bad for you. Night work's bad for you. You know, there's like hundreds of different aspects of work that are bad for you. And if you Google work is good for you, you'll find things like taking breaks is good for you. A nice glass of wine at the end of the day is good for you. There are so the sort of comparison of actually useful sources of where work is good for you are so much fewer. But of course, work is good for you when you're energized by it, when you're spending time with like-minded people, where you're making a difference, where you're using your skills, where you're doing something you're good at, or where you're learning something. I mean, there are, you know, and those are all the kind of things that are quite difficult to institutionalize, you know, because they're about understanding each other. What will motivate you is something that is different from what will motivate me. So if we both work for the same person, you know, they need to understand both dimensions.
They need to be able to adapt. So then we get back to the individual again. So both the individual who's working for somebody or with somebody, and the person may be responsible for managing each of those individuals. So what I'd like to just do now to end our wonderful conversation is I'd like to ask you a question. How can someone best use the advice in your book?
Okay, so it will depend on who you are and where you are. But if you're a leader of a company, if you're in the top role or in a board role, you can take the philosophy of my book, and you can consider, you can almost do yourself like a SWOT analysis of how you think your organization is doing against those factors. I mean, you may or you may not have, you know, surveys to tell you whether people are proud to work in your organisation, but I would challenge you to have a look at those 5 dimensions do your own self-assessment where you are, and I would imagine that you would already know, where you might have some points you could think about. If you are an individual, I think you should really consider what you know about yourself. I mean, how much you can identify that what you're looking for yourself in your work. I don't mean it to be too grandiose to think about creating a huge global impact from the role that you're following for yourself, but to actually think, what do I want to feel at the end of a day, at the end of a week, at the end of a year? What do I want to get out of my work? And then I would apply the factors against that answer, because the way the book's landed has been quite a surprise to me. I mean, I've continued to work with companies, if you like, looking at this as like a framework to help people become more engaged or performing in different ways. But actually, it's resonated with people who said to me, "Okay, so how can I do this for myself?" And actually, that's been the unexpected pleasure of the book, because I've been helping. It tends to be younger people, but sometimes in career changes, but helping people reassess. Am I even in the right sector? Am I going in the right direction? Does my work sit with my life in the right way? And that's actually that's made a difference. That's made me feel I've made a difference. So I think that it has a role across the board, really.
And I do a lot of work with HR professionals, and they're often in that, let's use your word that you don't like, enabling space. They get tasked with, they're the intermediaries, maybe trying to shape something by listening to the employees, but also listening to the leaders. What advice would you give them?
Well, I think they are in a really pivotal role, as you say. And I think the advice I'd give them is to have faith in your own skills and the value of your own perspective. If you're working in HR, I imagine you already have, a pretty good handle on organisational goals, big needs for your talent management, all the kind of the HR people strategy, if you like. But have faith in your skills as a communicator, as a people person, as understanding people, and promote those skills to your leadership. Because I think that when leadership truly shows that combination of, if you like, strategic intelligence and emotional intelligence, you find an organisation that is thriving. And I think that there's an opportunity at the moment, not least because of COVID and the way that we've all had to deal with different challenges in our own life. But there's an opportunity to be brave, that emotional intelligence can make a huge difference to organisational performance. And you can find research to back you up, but I just feel that HR professionals sometimes need that confidence. That, in my experience, they need that confidence to not to sort of hide behind their skills, but to push them forward.
So, obviously, our advice is go buy the book. And if they want to contact you as well directly, because I know you very well and you're a very open, very approachable person. So how can they go about contacting you, Sheila? What's some of the little handles you have out there in the social media or the world that I'll put some links in the show notes. So.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I'm contactable on LinkedIn. I'm very open to conversations about how companies do what individuals need. I can talk about this all day. I try not to, but definitely contact me on LinkedIn, or otherwise on Twitter. I'm Sheila _Parry on Twitter, and I'm pretty much communicate there, not all the time, but I will check it. I check in all the time.
So now you know what to do, ladies and gentlemen out there. So Sheila, it's been wonderful. Thanks for sharing all your insights and wisdom, and wishing you lots of success.
Thanks very much. I really enjoyed it, and happy to carry on the conversation. Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. You will find details of what we covered in the show with links, etc. in the show notes. Please share your key takeaways from today's guest and let your friends and colleagues know about the podcast. Oh, and if there's a particular author or leading thinker you'd like me to interview, just get in touch and I'll do my best to get them on the show. This episode was brought to you by Wide Circle, helping you make better talent decisions. To learn more, visit widecircle.eu. That's WIDECIRCLE.eu. Until next time.